What's up, summoners? King Blair here. Today we're going to be talking about the current banner heroes, Hwayoung, as well as the new 4-star ML hero, Bad Cat Armin, and I'll quickly mention the new 4-star pity. I'm not going to go too into depth into it because it's most likely going to be Sunday's video, because it is kind of a weird thing, and I personally don't recommend it. But it is going to be there, and I'll quickly touch on it. And we'll also quickly touch on Kawerik, because he's actually a lot better than people actually give him credit for. So I kind of wanted to go over him as well. But if you like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and Discord server. Link in the description. As always, I'll put different sections for the different topics. So first, I'll actually give the summary of what's coming next, so you guys know what's coming up in the future. Then I'll also quickly talk about this new Mystic Pity, what I think about it. Then we'll do a quick summary of the heroes, what I think about them, what they kind of do, what they're out there to do. Then I'll show you my personal Hwayoung, because I actually really like this character and I already pretty much almost finished building her. And then of course we'll go into depth with each of the units kits, how they function, what builds which you want to use on them, and all of that good stuff. So again, if you like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and just silver link in the description. I already said that. Let's just jump right in. So first, what's coming next? As you guys know, so right now we have Hwayoung, who's a new hero who just came out. She is going to be out for 2 weeks. There is a really good chance that we'll get a 1 to 2 week break period, and then we're going immediately into the Guilty Gear rerun. If you guys don't know Guilty Gear, that's units like Dizzy, Baiken, Elfelt. I think that's it actually. Dizzy, Baiken, Elfelt, right? So these units are limited, and they're also confirmed that a new limited is going to be coming out. We have no idea who the new limited is going to be. It could be Aino, it could be Ram Lethal, it could be a lot of different Guilty hero characters, but we are getting a new limited hero, and limited heroes tend to be very strong, and you always want to have enough to pull, at least for the new limited. If you're a new player, ideally you're also pulling for Dizzy. Right now, if they don't buff Baiken or even Elfelt or give them extra stuff, it's not the end of the world if you don't get them, but Dizzy and potentially the new hero will be heroes you want to get, especially if you're early on, because this is really good for PvE content. But again, that's in the future. We'll cover it as it gets closer. But because of that, what I would actually recommend, because Hwayoung is actually going to be out for 2 weeks, wait 2 weeks until near the end of her banner to make a better decision to see if we get more information, right? If we get the information about what the new Guilty Gear character is going to be, then you can decide, do I want Hwayoung, do I want the new Guilty Gear character, or maybe you're like, man, I have a lot of summons, I'm going to go in on her and I'm going to pull for her because you sounded what you said. At the end of the day, it's going to be your choice of the account. I can only give you my recommendations, and I know everyone has different free-to-play requirements and different bookmarks. So I'll try to be mindful, and be mindful that there is going to be a lot of limited heroes coming your way. On the other hand, for the Mystics, I would wait till next week. Again, you should always wait to see what the new hero is. Next week, we will find out what the new MO 5-star hero is. So wait before you pull and waste your Mystics, because you'll be able to find out and still be able to pull for the unit. So just make sure that you know that as well. So with all that stuff out of the way, we can now start talking about the actual heroes as well as this current system. I'm going to summarize this real quick because it's going to be a full video. But essentially, I don't recommend using this 4-star guaranteed summon unless you really want the unit and are willing to whale, right? That's the only situations where this is going to be really good. It is not, and the only other situation where this could be decent is if you're already like a pity and you really want the 4-star and are waiting for another pity character to pity. But even then, it's not the best. Why do I say that? Particularly for free-to-play heroes, it takes 200 summons to go to pity, and most of the time you're going to be going to pity for the 5-star hero. This is your one chance to get a guaranteed 5-star hero. If you're going to this 4-star pity, you're using a lot of summons towards a 4-star, which means that you're not getting a 5-star hero, MO hero in the future. Now, there are some really strong MO 4-star heroes like AOL, but unless it's a hero that's AOL level, I don't think it's like particularly worth it. And even then, it's just weird because you're essentially giving up a 5-star, MO 5-star, right? So by you doing this, you're essentially giving up the potential of getting an MO 5-star in the future. So I don't think it's a good idea because it's a little bit harder to get the MO 5-stars. But again, to each their own. I think it's really good for players that spend. If you're someone that spends and really wants the hero, like with AOL, you could have easily spent, gotten the guaranteed hero, and that would have been pretty good. But again, I personally don't think it's too worth it unless you're someone that actually spends. For free-to-play players, I would recommend not. And I'll talk about more about that in depth in a different video coming on Sunday. But with all that out of the way, now let's actually get to the characters, which is what you actually came here for. Man, this is already taking so long. But now is a quick summary for the heroes, and then we'll jump into the kits. Hwayoung is going to be the new hero, and she is looking to be a meta DPS hero. Going to be extremely good for Guild Wars, going to be pretty decent for Arena because she can't just one-shot things, but she's going to be a really solid option for RTA as well. I've gotten to test mine out, and she can deal with a lot of the meta units very well. She does really good into a Ravi, does really good into Crimson Armin, kind of goes even with Rimuru, and we'll talk about those interactions. We actually go into her kit, which is, I thought she was going to be a pure counter, but no, Rimuru still actually is able to kill her, just like she's able to kill him. So it's kind of a toss-up matchup between her and Rimuru. But again, she's able to one-shot a hero and does really good into Violet, right? So if you're someone that still struggles against Violet, she's actually really good. She's a very, very solid single target DPS damage dealing unit because she's just able to penetrate defense. She feels like she's going to be really good. Time will only tell, which is why I say wait at least 2 weeks if you're not sure. A, because we have the new limited, and B, because we don't know 100% how she's actually going to end up once people finalize builds and all that good stuff. So we don't really know the extent, but it's looking like she's going to be really good, right? I personally pulled for her. I think she's a solid unit. If you decide to pull for her, you'll definitely be used her at least for Guild Wars, if for not for RTA, because for RTA she actually has like really solid kit. I've been using it as a unawakened unit, and she's doing amazing. On the other hand, for Kawerik, he's actually a very solid option. Again, more tailored towards cleave and aggro players. If you're not a cleave or aggro player and don't have really good speed gear, you can't actually get the most use of Kawerik. But if you have really good speed DPS gear, Kawerik can be a menace to society, especially if you play aggro, right? He does extremely good damage, as well as being able to reset targets cooldowns. Very good in things like Mediator Kawerik, you know, his MO counterpart, and even Rimuru, right? Because you're able to reset the Rimuru S3. Very critical, very strong. Can do just dummy amounts of damage with his kit. Honestly, really solid unit, but requires very high gear investment as well as very specific playstyle to actually get the most mileage out of him. Overall, I wouldn't personally pull for him unless you really like him and you think he's really cool and you're an aggro player and you think you can have the OP gear to actually make him work. But again, I would say for the new limited hero, because they're likely to be more meta relevant than Kawerik. Although Kawerik is a pretty good unit. It's not, if you want to pull for him, he's not bad, right? Hwayoung, very strong, could potentially be a future meta DPS. We should wait in 2 weeks. We should have a really good idea, but she'll be amazing for Guild Wars at the worst. And now, last but definitely not least, for bad, Cat Armin, I think she's gonna be a really fun unit that is going to get better with time. As we get more units that can actually synergize good with her, she can be really good. And if the meta ever switches to be very heavy in the AoE department, she's going to be a very scary unit, right? She just combos really well with certain units. Like her and Stenet are incredibly scary. So it's definitely interesting to see how she's actually going to perform as new heroes are added that can actually go with her. I do not think she's AoL levels of broken. A lot of people say she's AoL levels of broken. I don't think she's that strong. She doesn't block a playstyle like AoL does, and she still relies a little bit on RNG. It's more like a closer to a Rem than an AoL, where Rem is a really good counter in the right situation, but in other situations she doesn't do that well. Same idea with the Cat Armin. But with that, let's actually dive a little bit deeper into the actual... Oh yeah, I was going to show you guys the build for Hwayoung, to show you guys that her stats are one of the easiest things to get. That's actually what I really like about her. Her stat line is actually really simple to get, but we are going to be talking about her first as well as her kit. But as far as the build, this is the personal build that I've been running on her, and honestly, it's been doing pretty good. There's very few situations where I wish I had immunity, but it just works well, right? So she's unawakened, right? She does have the S2 maxed out. She does have one imprint on her. I did end up slating her. These are her stat lines, right? And this is not optimized gear. This is just some of the gear that I had that I think would be good. Like, this is way too much effectiveness that she doesn't need. This has like barely any speed. She could be way faster here. Could have way more defense. Again, there's like a lot of room for improvement. This is a purple boot. It could be like way higher attack. And then even this one, actually this one's pretty decent, but it's a little bit too much HP, right? So she's not optimized, right? Her build's not optimized. She's still missing 2 awakenings. And look at the attack I'm actually able to get. It is very realistic to get a Hwayoung to be 7k attack with 240 plus speed, with 12k HP and with about the same defense that I have, and just be a monster of a unit, right? So she's actually very easy to build because all she wants is attack, defense, and speed. She doesn't really need HP. She doesn't really need anything else. All she needs is those 3 stats: attack, defense, and speed. That's it. 3 stats that a lot of gear actually does have. And speed, honestly, it's up to you how fast you want to make her. The faster, of course, the better, or even if you're doing counter, right? So let's actually look at her kit so you guys get an idea what she actually does. But I just wanted to show you that attack because it's going to go into how much damage she's actually capable of doing, right? Because I am shocked every time I see this unit's damage. I'm just like, what? How much damage? But again, as far as stat lines, she does have the S2, so her base attack is very high at 1500. This does not include the Molagora, so you will get an extra, I believe this is 15%. Yeah, you get an extra 15% off of her S2 when you actually Molagora it. So it's this plus that extra 15%, very base attack unit. Amazing HP and defense value, very standard bruiser. Nothing for crit rate, crit damage because she doesn't need it. No effectiveness because she doesn't need it. And the speed, she's not super fast, but it's not bad, right? Like 109, it's like, it's bruiser. It's like about what you'd expect a bruiser unit to be around, like, you know, like a Robbie's around this range as well. It's not like 115, that's like the standard speed, and it's not like a fast unit like 120 plus. So again, not bad, really solid stat line. And her awakening is going to be attack, which is going to let her do more damage. And effectiveness, which honestly kind of sucks. You definitely should go for that attack. But now, let's actually show a preview of her skills to get an idea, and I will most likely showcase her in the PvP coming Monday. I know I've been a little slow on the updates, but I should be able to showcase it for you guys. But first, DS1 attacks the enemy with a quick and increases combat readiness by 15%, right? So that one, pretty nice. You get a 15% combat readiness boost. Nothing too crazy. When you are buffed, you inflict additional damage according to the caster's attack, whether or not the attack hits. This is essentially going to be Uberia's Tooth. If you don't know what Uberia's Tooth is, essentially does extra damage afterwards, right? Kind of like Senya's artifact as well. And Uberia's Tooth does a really good job paired up with her, because it does extra damage based on the attack. So you kind of see it here. So you see the S1, and then here you see the passive that does extra damage based on her attack. Even though it doesn't look like it does a lot, this skill is nuts. I am shocked at how much damage this S1 actually does. Every time I use it, I'm like, man, this feels dirty, right? Like, I actually feel like this is dirty, especially when it's paired with Uberia's Tooth. This S1, if you have attack buff, you're doing like 10k damage. It's even more if you have attack buff, because of the Uberia's Tooth passive, because of her actually own passive. It does a lot of damage and also lets her cycle faster to her S3, and her S3 is on a very low cooldown, which makes her incredibly threatening, because we'll go in a second with S3. But yeah, it's all damage. But it's just really good damage. Like, it just does incredible damage. And it's the reason why people are actually testing her with counter set, because she does so much damage on counter, and she actually does get some CR push. So it's actually not bad to actually have in her counter set. She's actually able to make use of it, get that CR push, and do some really disgusting damage. Like, I am shocked how much damage it does. The reason why this does so much damage is because she can't crit. And because she can't crit, it's not getting mitigated by things like Adamant Shield. The only things that are going to be reducing this damage is damage sharing effects like Aureus, like T-Crosset, or Proof of Valor. That's the only things that are going to mitigate this damage, right? Because she doesn't crit, right? So it's just really, really high damage, and it does good damage against water units. Why? Because it's based on her attack, and it doesn't matter whether the attack hits or not, which also makes her a really good volley counter. And this is just her S1, right? It's just a damage skill, but it's a very good damage skill. It's one of the better damage skills because it almost makes her element neutral, and essentially makes her ignore Adamant Shield, right? So it's really, really solid. Then we get to her passive, which is really where you start seeing the spice. Not only do you get that massive attack boost, which is why she has such high base attack, but she's also going to get a built-in, very strong Adamant Shield, very similar to LQC and very similar to Arch Seaman's Shadow. 30% damage mitigation from crits is nothing to laugh at. If you've gone against Proof of Valor and things of that nature in OQCs, you know how bulky these things can get. It is very hard to actually get past things like this, which is why things like Rimuru are so good, and why she's actually such a solid unit, right? Because she does extra damage that doesn't crit, right? So again, there are ways to do damage, like regular Ice Area, not regular Ice Area, Bomb Ice Area can actually, Fire Ice Area can actually do true damage with the bombs, so it won't trigger in those situations. But again, against crits, against a lot of units, Robbie being the big one, not going to be doing too much damage to you, right? 30% mitigation, that is really, really solid. On top of that, you also are going to be getting a barrier that is based on your attack. With their already high base attack, the barriers end up being around 2.5 to 3k HP, and with attack buff, it even goes a little bit higher, right? It is a really solid barrier, right? It's a very, very, very strong barrier, and it lets her essentially be even bulkier than she actually is, right? So again, not bad. And then we have the S3 that is going to be the main reason why you'd be pulling for her. It's arguably the most unconditional true damage that we have in the game. Why do I say that? Well, first, you cleanse all debuffs. So as long as you're not CC'd by like Silence, Provoke, or Stun, even if you have Unable to be buffed, Attack Break, Decrease Defense, Glancing Hit, all these debuffs, it doesn't matter. As long as you get your S3, she'll cleanse everything, and she's going to come in, give herself immunity, and penetrate the caster's defense by 100%, right? And on top of that, the damage increases when the difference is in HP is higher. And if you soul burn, you get an extra turn, and it's on a 3-turn cooldown. So why is this skill good? Well, first, the cooldown is really low, right? 3 turns with an S1 that cycles, you're using the skill pretty frequently. right? Especially because you're 240, 250 speed, you're easily getting to 2 to 3 times in RTA in a match, right? And in Guild Wars, you're going to be using this 2 to 3 times. You can solo DPS in Guild Wars because of her S3 as well as her S1. On top of that, if you do soul burn, you get an extra turn, which means you theoretically you could do soul burn, do the S3, follow up with an S1, right? Then take one turn with an S1, and then your S3 is already back up again, right? So it could be very threatening, especially when you have souls, just because of how much damage you can do, right? So it's really, really good in that aspect. The other aspect why it's really good is that it cleanses, so they can't attack break you, right? They're taking this damage. Unless they provoke her or silence her or stun her, they are taking this damage, right? They are going to be taking this big damage. And on top of that, it penetrates defense, so it does very good damage on healthy targets. There's a reason she's so good into a Ravi is because her damage is just out the wazoo. She can almost one-shot a Ravi, and she can actually one-shot her with attack buff. So to kind of get an idea how it works, because I understand that might be a little bit weird, I have her here, and I have my current Hwayoung, right? And we can put this at 0, right? Because she doesn't increase damage, right? So mine is most likely going to be here, most likely honestly here. It's very realistic to get one here, even higher, right? It is very possible to do that. Without attack buff, right? It doesn't matter how much defense the opponent has. They could have 2,000, right? Right? Your S3 is going to be doing almost 20k true damage, assuming you have the current HP differential. The damage does go down when your HP differential is lower, but it's around 6,600 where you get the max damage. So it's the max damage. This means against a Ravi, because a Ravis are usually over 20k. Same with Rimuru's, same with Crimson Armin's, Troublemaker Corsairs, Fallen Cecilia's, you know, all these things. With the Barriers Tooth, of course, that's added right here. You are going to be doing really good damage. Almost 20k. Add on top of that an attack buff, you're looking at essentially one-shotting almost any tank in the game. On an unconditional skill that you can choose who you use it on, that is up every 3 turns, right? That is very scary. That is a lot of damage. Now, the thing that is actually very interesting with her is, and of course you see the Barriers Tooth damage that is already added on, I believe. I'm not sure if it's, I think it already is added on. And you also see with attack buff, you do get a 4k HP barrier, making her very, very bulky, right? Again, but let's take away the attack buff. Even without attack buff, this will pretty much almost set up a Ravi to be killed the next turn. And the S1 is going to follow up and do some pretty disgusting damage. This does not include the extra fixed damage, right? I don't know where they have the extra fixed damage, but it's not here, right? The extra fixed damage actually does do a lot more. So again, you're looking at a quite high amount of damage on a unit. That the only way to reduce is going to be with things like Proof of Valor, right? That do 30%. And of course, Proof of Valor does stop a lot. And the damage transfer, of course, things like Aureus, again, going to actually be mitigating her damage quite a bit. But again, very, very good unconditional damage. As the HP differential gets lower, right? Let's say you're doing this on a Celine, your damage does get significantly lower, and you do need to make a note of this, because if they have an Aureus, you're actually not going to be able to one-shot things like a Meru, right? Because the HP differential typically doesn't end up being as large as you would like it to be. So you end up not doing enough damage to actually one-shot a Merus, right? So just make sure that you have an HP differential enough to actually get the max damage. But again, now, how would you build it, right? First, you have the speed build, which is the one I'm using. The thing about the speed build that's really good is you're trying to cycle the skill. You're trying to go before your opponent. You're trying to one-shot a unit out of the bat. I think it's personally one of the better ones. But you also have the counter build where you can make use of her very high S1 damage. They don't show the fixed damage, but it is really freaking good, especially when paired with the Barriers Tooth. It does like 7 to 10k consistently, assuming you have a buff. Again, very, very solid, right? How would you use her? Typically, she's going to be in a Bruiser or Aggro draft, and she's going to be punishing slower, bulkier teams, right? People tend to like to bulk up with a Ravi. She punishes that really, really hard. She forces the opponent to try to take more aggressive options to actually get rid of her, right? And she can just deal with a Ravi very easily because you have a lower cooldown. You're cycling more than a Ravi to an extent, right? You're able to get your S3, you're able to almost one-shot her and just easily follow up with another unit and then just kind of finish the game from there, right? So it is very intimidating. She's very tanky, very hard to take out. Does this mean she doesn't have counters? No, Cleave does just destroy her because she's not going to outspeed any Cleave unit. She's not going to tank out any Cleave. She's going to die to a Cleave. She also does lose to Operator Sigurd. If the Operator Sigurd is faster, they can just S2 you, and it is very unlikely that you're going to survive that. So there's that. And Rimuru, even though you may think that she counters Rimuru because of how much damage she does, Proof of Valor Rimuru is very standard now, over 20k. That's what most people are running on the Rimurus. And because of that, if you don't kill the Rimuru right away, he'll S2 you, steal the immunity, steal the barrier, and then come in and one-shot you because you don't actually have that much HP, and because you can't mitigate the fixed damage with your passive, right? You're taking that 10k unless you have an Orius, which most likely means that your Hwayoung is going to die, right? So essentially, the Rimuru gets to trade, and he still gets to stick on the board and get a barrier. So it's not the best matchup. It's not a winning matchup. It's kind of even because it depends how good the opponent's Rimuru is. But most of the times that I played against Rimuru, I've actually lost, surprisingly, right? Just because the Rimuru tends to survive, come back, clap you back, and it's kind of hard to come back from losing your main DPS, right? So very good. If you're a Bruiser player, I highly recommend. If you're a Cleave player that's struggling against Ravi, against Violet, I highly recommend her. She's really, really good. I feel like I've talked about her quite a lot, and we do still have a ton of units to get through, and we're already 20 minutes in. What the heck? That's crazy. Okay, we have to speed it up a little bit. But again, very solid unit. Would I pull for her? If there wasn't the GG collab right around the corner, I would actually have said yes. I think she's going to be a really good unit. But again, wait 2 weeks to see what other people say and decide from there. So now that is going to lead us into Bad Cat Armin, another warrior. They tend to put a lot of warrior heroes. But Bad Cat Armin is going to be a MO 4-star that you can actually pity. She's going to have pretty decent HP, pretty decent defense, not a lot of attack, no crit rate, no crit damage. Pretty decent speed, right? 115, that's like about what you see a lot of heroes at. Her self-imprint is going to be critical hit chance, which is nice. Although it's kind of weird because I don't know if she does that much damage, right? Her damage is not like out this world. So it's a little weird that it is crit rate, but I mean, you know, crit rate is the best imprint. So if you're trying to get her to do some damage, crit rate is the best imprint, right? So there's that. As far as the skills, and because she's a 4-star, you can actually get all the imprint. So that's pretty interesting. You'll actually be able to really easily get her a lot more crit rate because she's a 4-star. You should be getting a lot of Armins. But as far as her skills, her S1 is pretty unique. DS1 is going to apply injuries. The damage dealt is going to be based on her health, which is why you don't see her attack be that high. And the injuries can do up to 5%. When it is your turn, this skill is an AoE attack. It will not trigger on a dual attack, so you won't get this AoE when it's a dual attack. But this is actually a pretty annoying skill, right? Because what does this skill do? Well, it's essentially poke, right? You shouldn't expect this skill to kill, but it is good poke, right? You are injuring the opponent quite frequently. Every time you take a turn and you do your S1, you're kind of poking a little bit, right? You're doing just a little bit of poke, 5%, you know. As long as you do 5% of the enemy's HP, she's basically doing her job. Not the craziest thing on the planet. Being an AoE attack, also not the greatest thing, right? Because you are going to trigger a lot of counterattacks like Belian, Rem, right? Violet. But again, at the end of the day, not terrible. Does do a little bit of injury, which can be nice against certain team compositions, but not the greatest S1, right? It doesn't do like insane amounts of damage either. It's just mostly there to do a little bit of poke damage and do some injuries, right? You're just slowly poking the opponent down. That's what she does. She kind of pokes the opponent down. Not the greatest S1 on the planet. The S3, I am skipping the S2 because I'll show you guys in a second why. The S3, again, nothing crazy either. You attack the enemy, and it's one enemy, and you get a speed buff on yourself and a barrier on all allies, and your damage is based on the caster's max health, right? This skill, again, does decent damage. It's not like gonna one-shot something, but it is gonna do pretty decent damage, right? But again, not the craziest thing on the planet, right? Barrier is nice on your team. Speed buff is nice because, again, you're cycling more, you're able to poke more. But now you may be wondering, man, this looks okay, right? She doesn't look like she's doing anything special or anything crazy. But then you get to her S2, and this is the reason if you're pulling for her is because of this S2. Essentially, what this S2 is saying is that when you're attacked, after being attacked, so her, when she's attacked, you have a 40% chance to give increased critical hit damage to the ally in the front and make that ally counterattack. This is the reason why she's good. This is not a once per turn, right? If you're pulling for her, again, this is the reason why you would be pulling for her. It's this S2 alone, right? And the things that you can actually do with this skill, right? It's not a once per turn. It will not trigger off of extra attacks or counterattacks. So don't think that you're going to trigger a counterattack on Belian with this. You're going to get hit and you're going to trigger it and then be able to double punish the Belian. It doesn't work that way. For better or for worse, it doesn't work that way. If it did, it'd be really scary and it'd be kind of broken. But since it doesn't work that way, it makes her a little bit less scary, but it's still a really good skill, right? Because at the end of the day, you're giving the frontmost ally increased critical hit damage and making them counterattack. To put it simply, she's going to be just as good as your frontline ally. So let's say you put someone like Spectre Tenebria, right? The only way to hit Spectre Tenebria is to use an AoE attack. So let's say your Spectre Tenebria is a lifesteal Spectre Tenebria, right? Decently bulky. Let's say they pick Belian to try to actually, you know, poke down your Spectre Tenebria. Well, if they pick Belian, that means that they are going to be hitting your bad Cat Armin. And if they're hitting your bad Cat Armin, 40% is a quite high chance to actually trigger this for your stand-in to get an increased critical hit damage buff and trigger a counterattack and do dummy damage. This can also work if you're using Belian on your own. It can work if you're using a Ravi on your own, right? So there's a lot of different heroes that actually work in that frontline spot. But it mostly is going to be, I think Stenna is going to be one of the best ones because it's the only way to actually hit Stenna is AoE, and if they're doing an AoE, they're hitting your bad Cat Armin, right? So in those situations, her with Stenna is extremely really good. Same with Belian, right? Can be really good as an anti-cleave option because if the opponent is doing a lot of AoE attacks, you're going to be triggering the skill a lot. You're going to be doing a lot of frontline counterattacks. You're going to be doing a lot of damage that way. So again, it can be really scary as a anti-cleave option against certain type teams, and it can be a pretty good option to punish AoE teams. But the thing is that is going to be pretty much all she's going to do, right? Her S1 is not out this world crazy, right? It actually being a forced AoE is worse in some situations than better, right? Then it can be annoying, but it's not like gonna be the craziest thing on the planet. The S3 is nice. It does let your team survive longer, lets your Stenna, your frontline ally, survive longer. You do get the speed buff to try to do a little bit more poke damage over time, you know, slowly injure the opponent down. But again, it's the S2, right? If the opponent goes very heavy single target damage, she doesn't do a lot, right? Especially if they have someone like Hwayoung, they can pretty much one-shot your bad Cat Armin, right? And I know Hwayoung is actually, I'm actually have to consider it because she's actually really good. Or think something like Rylet, right? So in those situations, she doesn't really do a lot, right? She's a unit that will kind of sit there if you don't have a really good frontline unit. Now, the one thing I will say, Champions Trophy does also give you the opportunity to stun, so you can get some pseudo control and can be really annoying while getting that counterattack. But again, I think that's going to be her best artifact, most likely going to be Champions Trophy, to try to make more stuns with this AoE. Since you're forced to AoE when it's your turn, at least potentially get some stuns to potentially counter some of those counterattack units. That part would be nice, right? So it would be nice if you actually do have that. But again, nothing crazy about her kit. Like, there's nothing that, like, besides S2, this could be really good, but it's only as good as your foremost ally, right? If you have a very good Stenna, this skill is really strong, the combo will be really strong together, right? But if you're putting in the front line, like, a unit that doesn't really do too much, then it's not as scary, right? So she's going to be as good as the ally you have in the front, and she's going to be very annoying with this AoE attack if you have Champions Trophy, which I honestly think is the best artifact for her, just because with Champions Trophy, you can cheese some stuns, and that will catch people off guard, right? So again, not bad. Loses to single target deep heavy teams because you're able to single target DPS her down, but again, you can build her pretty bulky, and she can be really annoying to actually deal with in certain situations. Do I think she's like OP broken like AOL? No. Do I think she's bad? Absolutely not. She seems like she's very strong in the right situations with the right team compositions, and she's only going to get better with time as better heroes to put in the front line. And if we ever get to a more heavy AoE meta, she will be a really good unit in that situation. So she has the potential to be a really good unit. I don't personally think she's like a must pull. But I mean, if you do pull for her because you like her and you think you can have a really good stand in, then she can be pretty good. But now we're quickly going to touch on Kawerik super quickly. But essentially, he's going to have very great attack, terrible HP, which doesn't really matter. Really solid speed, 119 is not bad, is one of the faster ones. High defense, standard mage build on the HP and defense, and some help on the crit rate. But with the EE, she actually gets a lot of help with the crit rate. So he essentially has very high starting crit rate, like 35%. Because of his help plus this, and he's going to also get attack buff or attack imprint to make him do more damage. Essentially, for Kawerik, the main way to actually use him, his S1 is going to be just I believe it's just a silence, right? Yeah, just a silence. Does decent damage. Damage is based on speed, so you typically do make him fast. He's a mage, he can carry his own book. This is the main reason you'd be using him. This skill does really good damage, and because he's a mage, you can soul burn it to ignore F-res and essentially reset a unit's cooldowns for 2 turns, guaranteed. That is the reason you would use him. That's literally it. Why he's so good. That S2 alone. Because it can destroy a lot of teams that rely on it. Mediator Kawerik being a big one. A Ravi, Dilibet, right? A lot of cleavers and aggro players are actually picking him up to counter things like Dilibet, right? Because you actually do end up stopping their S3s with this S2, right? Very good S2, puts a lot of pressure on the opponent, and also gives him stealth, which lets him follow up the next turn with an AoE that penetrates defense and also silences the enemy, and you can give him the EE to do extra damage, or the EE that gives you attack buff on this skill, right? So overall, his main purpose is going to be for aggro type drafts, but again, for the most part, mostly for aggro, requires really good speed gear and very specific drafts, very specific aggro cleave drafts, right? I honestly think he's a really good unit. It's just extremely difficult to actually make him work well, and he does have a very steep learning curve. I would skip him unless you really like him, because we know we're getting the other ones, and because there's so many other units to pick. So, as a conclusion, to summarize everything, Hwayoung, really, really good. If the collab wasn't around the corner, I would probably tell you to pull. Wait 2 weeks to see if people think she's going to be even better. I think she's going to be a very meta unit. I think she's a really good pickup. And she's extremely easy to build, has a very low learning curve. It is very easy to build her, very easy to start winning with her. That's what's so nice about her, right? Does struggle against certain things. She's not like the end all be all, but definitely good into like a Ravi, which a lot of people do struggle against, and a really solid DPS booster, right? It's a very solid booster option. As far as Cat Armin, not the strongest thing on the planet. People say she's the second AOL. She's not. She's good in the right situation, but she's not gonna be like this thing you're gonna see everywhere, right? Can be pretty solid anti-cleave, can be like very solid anti-AoE, but not gonna be like this super strong menace everyone's making her out to be. Gonna be pretty annoying in certain situations and really good in AoE against AoE heavy drafts, but again, could probably skip as well, and you shouldn't use the Mystics because I personally don't like that pity as much. And then Kawerik, really high build requirements, not limited. You should be saving your bookmarks for limited, unless you have a very specific cleave aggro draft that you can actually draft them in. But that's going to be all I have for you guys today. This video took way longer than I expected, so I will definitely put different sections. But that's all I got for you guys today, and I will see you next time. Peace.